already nervous.
Good morning, Olgeta.
Good morning.
So on Monday I spoke in my mother's language, and this morning I'm speaking in another language, Fiji, which is just 2 out of 800 languages from where I come from. So adapting guidelines to my country is a challenging task, but thank goodness our constitution recognizes 3 main languages that we use, that's the English, Pidgin, and the Motu language. So before I go into the presentation, I take this opportunity to thank the advisory panel, a great team that I've worked with over the past 2 years. Thank you, Sasai and the team, the tech team, Chase and Sophie and Mariana and Rosa. Thank you so much for all the assistance you have provided to us in our efforts to get these guidelines completed. So it is an honor and a privilege to see the result of what we've done over the past 2 years, and I stand here very satisfied, having received the feedback and the positive reaction from everyone in this room about the guidelines. It really gives me a sense of satisfaction. So thank you so much to you all. Now, I'll commence my presentation on adapting the regional guidelines to your jurisdiction. I will just open up firstly with just general ideas or general understanding on how our regional guidelines can be adapted in each of our jurisdictions. So adapting the regional guidelines on SGBV for prosecutors and witness support officers involves customizing the guidelines to fit the specific legal, cultural, and operational context of your jurisdiction. It requires a systematic and a coordinated approach. Now, as I go along through this presentation, I will quote some of the feedback that we received during a consultation process where every member of the advisory panel was tasked with conducting consultation with our local agencies back home to see their views and also get their input in terms of how the regional guidelines would work in our jurisdictions. So as you can see there, stakeholder feedback from the Cook Islands Police, these guidelines are aspirational and support the drafting of a contextualized Cook Islands specific guideline once the regional document is confirmed. So key considerations in implementing or adapting the guidelines are the legal context. So in summary, this is referring to existing legal framework that we all have in place, the criminal practice and procedural laws that exist in our jurisdictions, what are the rules of evidence that are in place in our jurisdictions. Before we use these guidelines, we must know that they align with our legal framework. Now, the cultural context, we look at things like what are the customary norms that are practiced in our countries. Language, cultural diversities, like I said, I come from a tribe of country of 1,000 tribes, more than 800 languages, and so cultural influences or the impact of that also plays out in the work that I do. Operational context is also important. As a prosecution agency or a Department of Justice, wherever you are throughout the Pacific, you must be aware of the powers and functions and the practice policies that apply to your office in the performance of its duties. Likewise, to witness support services that are existing in your country, what are their existing operations and what are their policies? When you adapt the regional guidelines, I would think that is something important that you must consider. So in the legal context, like I said, what is the criminal justice system like in your country? What are the court structures and processes? Like we heard this morning, Cook Islands have a 2-tier court structure. In PNG, we have a 3-tier court structure. And all of these different processes and structures that we follow must be taken into consideration. Now, we are also encouraging that you identify aspects of the guidelines that provide a basis for you to recommend law reform or legislative amendment where you see the need. So the Nauru Police Force, during the consultation, gave their view. The Nauru policy is legislated in Nauru. However, the issues as discussed in part 1 about the policy are also experienced in Nauru, with cases where witnesses or victims could sometimes become reluctant to be fully cooperative during the investigation and proceedings phase because of close family and community ties. Now, cultural context. We have various beliefs, practices, traditions that we observe even in the formal legal process. It has some level of influence or impact. Now, aspects of the guidelines such as the vulnerability risk assessment involves us as people who will be applying or implementing the guidelines, having an awareness of the family background of the people we are dealing with, what are their beliefs and what are the societal norms in our country. For instance, taboos relating to sexual matters. Children might not be allowed to speak to you about sexual encounter that they have because they're not allowed to. So in as much as possible, our guidelines must try to be sensitive in that area. But at the same time, there are those, in my personal view, opportunities that we can try to advocate for certain, influences to be taken away or to be done away with. Okay, another one is views about LGBTQ. Some jurisdictions might accept persons who are LGBTQ. Some jurisdictions might have a different view towards this category of vulnerable persons as the guidelines sort of accommodate for. In doing so, in having that awareness is important. Now, the original guidelines also require a lot of processes that involve constant communication with a witness. And so sections of the guidelines can be adjusted to accommodate the witness preferences. For instance, language. And Solomon Islands DPP, one of the lawyers gave his feedback there. What form of language should be used when filling the form on behalf of a victim? For example, Solomon Islands, we normally interview or ask victim questions in Pidgin and they respond back in Pidgin. Should we translate what they said to English and when writing it down, or write down exactly what they are saying in their response in Pidgin? So those type of views or considerations can also be taken into account. One very interesting one is compensation in SGBV cases. It's part of culture and custom. We use compensation to settle dispute, but in applying the regional guidelines in relation to SGBV prosecution, we encourage that awareness on this idea that compensation is a basis to, discontinue a matter and all of that is not encouraged. So if you see here, like from the Family Support Center, PNG Department of Health and Social Work Division, we have social workers there who gave their view. One of them gave their view. I agree with the Nauru policy. As we have encountered a number of guardians of child abuse cases that do not report such cases to police. Main reasons for not reporting are because perpetrators may be immediate relatives, breadwinner, compensation option has been used, or that it might be a child perpetrator, or and the consequences of not reporting the matter, the child encounters ongoing abuse, unplanned pregnancies, suicidal thoughts, and so and so. So those are the cultural aspects in when thinking about adapting the regional guidelines to your jurisdiction. Now the operational context, we encourage here that an assessment to be conducted to identify existing knowledge and skills of your prosecutors, witness support officers in handling SGBV cases. If there are existing systems of operation already captured in the guidelines, they can be maintained if they are working well. So in Cook Islands, the Ministry of Justice feedback was that the RGE, or the regional guidelines, are very much aspirational. There is sufficient and ongoing under-resourcing in this area, a common problem or issue to all other jurisdictions. No funding for a witness support officer. Currently, their role and associated responsibilities are assumed by registrars, prosecutors, NGOs, and other social workers within government departments. However, although providing this service or support is a very ad hoc, it is working in practice, and that is clear from several successful sexual offending prosecutions in 2022. And that is the case for the jurisdiction where I come from, where a lot of practices are still ad hoc. We do not have our written guidelines in place as yet, and I believe it will happen in the very, very near future. Steps may be taken there may be steps or procedures in the regional guidelines that are not applicable due to varying operational processes, like what are your different stages of case preparation as a prosecution agency or a lawyer working in the Department of Justice. What are the court processes, like when do you conduct pre-trial hearings, or when do you conduct trial, how are your listings for cases done, and all of that. Jurisdictions may concentrate on certain areas that can be adapted, like for instance, if your operational work is fine, you can look into just the neutral policy and see how you can adopt it, or building a case for a witness support role to be incorporated into your agency organizational structure. In the absence of a witness support officer, a prosecutor who might be carrying out all these responsibilities can help to strengthen networks with stakeholders or external support services and adapt the guidelines. So in Samoa, Attorney General's Office, the Witness Support Officer's feedback was that we only have the SVSG and the hospital that has been the main place we've referred the victims to for support and other relevant services. On the part where there is an arrangement of transportation for the victim to the referral agencies, this does not happen often with me. So referring to the witness support officer, because most of the victims have been referred to the SVSG before their file is referred to the AG's office. So these are some real experiences being shared about what's happening in jurisdictions already. Now, my friends Lucy and Paul, thank you for your presentation this morning. Cook Islands pilot project is something that I thought I'd include in this presentation to put some perspective into how we try to pilot the regional guidelines or the draft guidelines during the course of our work as the advisory panel, that is. So the Cook Islands commenced a pilot project of the regional guidelines in relation to 2 matters involving sexual offending against a 14-year-old. In case A, the defendant was a relative. In case B, it involved a home invasion and sexual assault by a stranger. So in case A, they managed to go through stage 1 of the guidelines. The file was reviewed and charges were confirmed. That process continued on to when it came to the vulnerability risk assessment. There were time constraints and capacity issues. That process was delayed. In case B, stage 1 was completed. They met with the parents of the complainant, but the complainant herself had suffered some trauma, and so the parents had been having difficulty communicating with her so that they could assist to bring her to the police or the prosecutor who was dealing with the case in order to get some more information or insight into the process so they could better assist or prepare themselves. So at page 14 of the original guidelines, you can see when it says there, it accommodates for this. And it's highlighted, I've highlighted it there. When setting a date and time for the first meeting, considerations must be given to the complainant's preparedness to engage and communicate. So what were Cook Islands' challenges in conducting this pilot project? Lack of a witness support officer. It is very clear how important this role is in the process. A lot of responsibilities of the witness support officer are undertaken by the police or the prosecutor, who don't always have the capacity or the training or education to provide that level of support. Okay, and particularly referring to case B scenario. Capacity, there was only one prosecutor in the office at the time, so in fully implementing the guidelines, manpower is important. And the appropriateness of certain processes in the guidelines in some cases, as referred to above, the initial meeting with the complainant in case B did not take place as soon as it should have because of the state of the complainant. She was traumatized, and they had to give her some time before they could conduct that part of the process. So, from Cook Islands project and the challenges that we've noted here, I'll engage you all at this stage. How can the guidelines be adapted to suit the situation in Cook Islands, in that jurisdiction? Anyone discuss amongst yourselves and maybe list one or two ideas that the guidelines could be adapted to suit the situation in their case. So you can make reference to the green booklets that are before you, and you can use discuss amongst yourselves. What should Cook Islands do as they are adapting the regional guidelines? Yes, Professor?
Thank you for some more. So I think for us is we, like I say, I'm the only witness liaison officer back home, and guideline, I think we strongly suggest to have a risk assessment to add on the work of the prosecutor, but it's the time that we are looking at where to fit in, because it's usually sometimes we receive the file and 2 days after we receive the file, or 3 days, and it's the mention thing. So we are trying to figure out where we can slot in the risk assessment, so we have enough time from the prosecutor to the witness support officer. But it's that's something that we are looking forward to add in our work that we get back.
Okay, thank you for that feedback from Tipesa. Yes, adjustments to be made in the existing practices that you have in Samoa. So if you look at the regional guidelines, it says there, let me refer you to the at 2.2. This is on page 12. Jurisdictions without dedicated witness support officers. That is where we will solve Cook Island's problem. It says the prosecutor with carriage of the case may perform some relevant witness support functions in addition to their role or function as a prosecutor. Okay, and then the second paragraph, in jurisdictions where a witness support role or service is not established within the institutional framework, non-governmental organizations can provide this assistance to survivors. So to assist the prosecutor in the Cook Islands, she would reach out to the support services. And when you are adopting these guidelines, what you would encourage is for your support partners to come and become familiarized with the vulnerability risk assessment form or the time frame that we need them to report back to us and say, look, the complainant in this case needs time because they need to go undergo counseling. So that communication will help the prosecutor in the Cook Islands to be able to assess how she will communicate that to the courts if the case is, approaching a listing date, so on and so forth. The guidelines provide that assistance in that respect. So for jurisdictions in this room who do not have a witness support officer, victim liaison officer, these guidelines are telling you, reach out to your support services or your networks. Okay, so I guess that answer there will, or that part of the guidelines basically addresses the first two challenges. How about the third one, appropriateness of the process or the guidelines? I'll refer you to stage 2.3, step-by-step support through the stages of prosecution. Can someone find the part or the section that can be adapted? I think I actually already gave you the answer in the previous slide. It's right there. Okay, so setting the time frame to conduct the meeting was not like the guidelines encourage quick action, immediate action, be fast in the way you are carrying out your processes. But the prosecutor in the Cook Islands couldn't do that because the complainant was traumatized. And it was uncertain to her how long she would wait for the complainant to be brought to her. So in adapting the guidelines, you can make those adjustments when you are implementing it in your jurisdiction. And in the same way, what are your referral strategies? Okay, so at the end of the, I think the guidelines, there's a list of referral services there. It's your job when you are trying to adapt these guidelines to identify the referral agencies and what sort of agreement or let's say arrangement you can make with them in terms of referral and the time for them to provide feedback to you. Okay. All right. Is that clear? Like the little illustration that I'm giving to help you adapt the guidelines in your jurisdiction. Okay, moving on. These are some of the other consultation feedback that we received. So Cook Islands Police were very interested in the attached templates, okay, the templates in the guidelines, and they said that a number of them would be helpful to include in their police file. That's a really positive feedback from Cook Islands Police. Nauru Police say that guidelines in Part 2 has provided a well-acknowledged and very relevant and generally suitable to Nauru's context. Can I get, sorry, I almost said, can I get an amen? Is that consistent with your views? And Nauruans who are here in the room, do you agree with this? Yeah? So guidelines in part 2. Okay, in Samoa, Attorney General Office, I would be seeking approval from my supervisors for the use of attachment A, G and C. Okay, so G is when we were doing the draft part. It's not in this one, it's A up to E only. I would like to see other services other countries use. Okay, witness support officer is an integral integral to the guidelines. Jurisdictions who adopt the guidelines will have to engage people to do that role. Solomon Islands DPP gave that feedback. Now, from my unit in the office that I work in, I gave my feedback or my view that was put into this during this consultation was that we have 1 witness support officer and 2 victim liaison officers positions in our office structure. So the OPP, we have a position for witness support officer and victim liaison officer. But at present, or at that time of the consultation, we had less than 5 operating currently at that time in the main center. So adapting the guidelines will support the need to create more positions and recruit more VLOs and WSOs to expand that service throughout the country. Our friends from the Salvation Army in PNG, they have a victim support desk at the courthouse and also House of Hope, like counseling network in place. They say, I'm glad this guideline can be useful to us to see how best we can bring awareness and come up with strategies on how best to educate survivors that once the case is in the hands of police and prosecutions, we have to cooperate and let the justice process take its course. So these are some of the feedback. So in implementing or adopting the guidelines, we can all appreciate that capacity and training is needed, because this might be something very new to some of the jurisdictions in this room, am I right? So we developed tailored training programs focusing on legal framework, victim-centered approaches, trauma-informed care, and best practices. We've learned all of that in this workshop in the past 2 days. Okay? Now it's our turn to impart all of that knowledge to back home when we return and engage some of these very important speakers, I would think. Like last night I spoke to the counselor, our guest speaker who presented the last session yesterday. I asked her if she could give me her contact, because I was interested in her presentation and I want to invite her to PNG to give the presentation to my colleagues and my witness support officers and victim liaison officers back home. And she was more than happy to offer that assistance as well. So capacity building programs are important. Once you adapt the guidelines, it becomes standardized. Okay? No more ad hoc practices, no more informal practices. What you have on paper is something that you need to run capacity building programs. So you familiarize prosecutors, witness support officers, everybody learns the same thing, everybody knows how the process is going to work. We are all on the same page, right? And then ongoing support and mentoring, I think this was mentioned by Lucy in her presentation, and as well as opportunities for continuous professional development to keep everyone updated on best practices and the emerging trends in SGBV prosecution. Okay, so now police force again was one of the main agencies that provided us a lot of feedback. Training of witness support officers in understanding their role and responsibilities will be paramount, and the prosecutor as well in understanding the boundaries between theirs and that of the witness support officer. Do you guys agree with that? So we are not overlapping in our roles. Prosecutor knows exactly what they're supposed to do. Witness support officer knows exactly what their role is in that process. Stakeholder engagement, collaboration, and coordination. So involving stakeholders such as government agencies, civil society organizations, and community leaders in the adaptation process to ensure a buy-in and collaboration in implementing the guidelines. Relevant areas of the guideline where witness support role can be performed by external support organizations. So example like what PNG would have done in the absence of our VLO and witness support officer. foster collaboration and coordination among prosecutors, witness support officers, law enforcement agency, healthcare providers, and other stakeholders. So I mentioned yesterday about the referral pathway we have in PNG, where everybody who is playing part in supporting a survivor from the complaint stage all the way up to the prosecution stage, this network or this collaboration is very strong and it's working very effectively in PNG. And we also encourage that you ensure effective communication and information sharing, okay? Information sharing is key. So in PNG we have some arrangements where I have to go and attend certain workshops, basically to go and give presentations on what the OPP's role is, what the FASO unit's role is, so that someone who is working in the counseling space or in the medical space appreciates that this is the role that I play, and in them carrying out their role, they know that they are contributing to a very important cause, seeing a survivor go through the prosecution process with the aim of securing justice. So from the health department in Nauru, they say most victims of FSV or sexual violence present to the hospital for assessment, treatment, and evidence-based reports so that the offenders are prosecuted. Healthcare providers are important stakeholders in terms of these guidelines. Okay, some witness support resources. This is also part of your adapting the guidelines. Apart from, I think this is useless, sorry. Sorry about that. Apart from, it took me like 5 or 6 slides to realize that the mic wasn't working. So, with the witness support resources, as part of adapting the guidelines, you want to educate the people you are going to support, okay? So we have things like information brochures that your department or your office can come up with. And I'd like to introduce at this stage PNG's Pikinini Witness Booklet. This was just launched in December of last year, and you'll see it on your tables there. In the process of my engagement in the advisory panel, I was also working with my team to launch this particular booklet, and you will find there, it is a booklet purposely for child witnesses who are coming through the prosecution or the court process. So it's a 13-page booklet, and the aim is to allow enough information to educate child witnesses or victims. Either they can read it or it can be read to them, but mainly we hope that the information gives them a familiarization of the justice process, what happens in court, who they can expect they will be talking to in the process of their case. All of that stuff we capture in there, and how we also suggest ways on how they can be comfortable when they're coming to our office or going to the courthouse. All of these things we have captured in that booklet. So it is a resource for awareness purposes, and you can do that in your jurisdictions as well. So apart from them coming and seeing that you are carrying out all these processes and whatnot, trying to see them through the process, they already have an idea of what's going on because you educated them through the information booklets. Same as the child witness brochure, which is also there, the white brochures there. I'll be asking each and every one of us in your respective tables to conduct an exercise where you will fill in the brochure, so it gives you an idea of how important and how this information resource can be drafted or compiled and given out to complainants, especially child witnesses. You can also develop similar ones for adult victims as well, or adult complainants. The other support resources, like yesterday we saw, or over the past 2 days, we saw pictures of child witness rooms, right? Child-friendly environment, even the TTC setting in South Africa, We saw the Solomon Islands Child Witness Room. We saw, I think the other presenters also gave examples of the child witness room they have. And witness, in PNG we have what is called a witness waiting room. So this is something that is provided or was initiated by the Salvation Army Victim Support Network. So within the court complex, just close to where the courtrooms are, before if we have a case where the victim has to testify in the courtroom, we have the waiting rooms. So the victim liaison officer or the witness support officer accompanies the witness to the courthouse on the day of trial or the day that they will be giving evidence in court, and they are taken straight up to that room to wait. So in that room, they are provided, drinks and coffee and biscuit. Sorry, not coffee to the children, to the adults. And other things to make them feel comfortable or to help deal with the nerves and all of that, whilst waiting for them to be called into the courtroom. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a picture of that room to show it to you, but these are some arrangements you can probably propose to some of your non-governmental organizations who have lots of money. Can you help us with building this little additional room at the court precinct for our witnesses to come and wait? And so, in touching on that, I've got two feedback here that I want to also show you. For someone at Attorney General's office, they say we don't have court brochures or court information sheets that we can distribute, but this is something we would like to explore and inquire about its availability. Now, the PIC counseling services in PNG, they said it's good to see the guidelines also touches on security plans, which are very important to ensure safety of a witness who has been well prepared for the trial. Any unexpected contact with the perpetrator must be avoided at all costs. So I think that is also captured in the guidelines. Those adaptations can also be made to your jurisdiction. Okay, before I conclude, how much more time do I have? 5? Okay. Just around the table, look at the brochures in front of you, and you'll see a contact checklist and a contact checklist, regional guidelines, sample events. Okay, this is the contact checklist is something that can be used to sort of go back to review and assess when you are adapting the guidelines. I believe what are these different roles or actions taken by the prosecutor and the witness support officer that you can think of as you are applying or implementing the guidelines. And the tailored example for each jurisdiction's completion is in the blank one. So you see the sample here, this sample, and you fill this in. Okay, so for instance, stage 1 introduction first meeting. In example, let's say in Fiji, what's stage 1 of your process? What's already operating in your jurisdiction? And what are some of the events that will trigger, the event trigger or the details of what you would do, and what would be the specific actions for prosecutors or the witness support officers you can list on these last 2 columns. Is that clear? Yeah? So the sample is here, you just use them to follow. So like I was saying, adapting the guidelines, not all of these steps will be applicable. You might have your different processes of operation, you fill that out here, and you fill out what you would do as a prosecutor or a witness support officer. And making reference back to the original guidelines. Your second task is to look at the witness support, the child witness brochure, and you can fill it in depending on the information available or the circumstances in your jurisdiction. So the idea was for you to fill in the information based on what is existing in your jurisdictions. And for the other activity with the checklist, I think table number 1 here, Marshall Islands and Tuvalu. I'd like to call them up, or one of them, to give an example of how the regional guidelines apply in their jurisdiction or would be adapted to their jurisdiction based on the checklist that they were ticking off.
For the Marshall Islands, when it comes to specifically the AG's office, at first we don't necessarily meet with the victims or the survivors right away. Either they go to these guys who provide the additional services, and these guys will refer them to this other legal service called the Micronations Legal Services Corporation. So they're the ones who deal with the victims first. The only time we get to speak with these victims is when the case file comes to us after the police do their investigation and we're ready to take it to court against the perpetrator. But in most instances, it's the legal services who deal specifically with them. So to me, in terms of like a witness support officer, they will most likely be at the legal services where they can support them straight after these guys or the police refer them to that legal service. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. Okay, because we are pressed for time, I'm just going to conclude my presentation here. You can still share feedback and your views towards the end of the day or when there is time for questions. So PILON regional guidelines are very important and useful guide. It can be adapted in all jurisdictions of the Pacific. Prosecutors and witness support officers will be equipped with the enhanced knowledge and skills to improve the prosecution and witness support services for gender-based violence survivors. And existing practices that are working well can be maintained and further enhanced by adapting the applicable sections of the guidelines. So, that's all, and thank you very much.